Well, welcome to MTA's first kind of video cast we're putting on here with the COVID-19 crisis that's going on and the governor's executive orders that she's been putting out. Of course, we've been fielding lots of questions about how this affects townships, their personnel, their meetings, budget meetings, and stuff like that. So Catherine Mulhaupt and myself, she's our staff attorney. I'm the director of member information services, Mike Selden here. And we just kind of want to take a few minutes and talk about some of the questions that we've been getting and what our responses are. So Catherine, if you want to welcome people also, say something, and hopefully this video thing will work well with it.
Sure. Hi, Mike, and hi to everybody watching. And we're going to try and answer some of the questions we've been getting by phone or email. Lots of things that we don't know yet because nobody knows them yet, but trust me, we will get information out as we become aware of it, and we will all get through this.
Thanks, Catherine. And we've got an update on our website that constantly gets updated right on the front page for the coronavirus updates. So as things come out and new things hit, we've been keeping things updated there. And even with the executive orders, hopefully the governor's office is going to keep updating things as far as what these essential services really mean. I think to some extent we've got it down somewhat for the township board, and we'll talk a little bit about that. With the executive order 2020-21 that came out yesterday, the stay-at-home one, that certainly kind of calls into question how boards are supposed to operate and conduct their meetings if people are supposed to be staying home, and how these will still be open to the public. So I know Catherine especially has put together a lot of time with MTA legal counsel to help try to get some answers with these, and we still have some, of course, that we're trying to get answered. But we'll kind of start with the first big question that we've been getting many times since yesterday at 11 o'clock. Just from a township board meeting standpoint, and what it means for townships holding a board meeting. Can they still do that, and how do they do that?
Sure. And yes, according to the executive order and the definitions included in it, and chatting with MTA legal counsel, we believe that township board members are, to use the language in the order, critical infrastructure workers, but I'm calling you necessary. All right, you are necessary personnel. The township cannot function without the board making certain determinations. Now, not everything needs to be addressed, and so if you are going to meet, you need to focus on the things that are necessary for your township to continue to function, and this is outlined in the executive order as well as our material that we put together. For most townships, March is the busiest month for your budget because most townships, about 75% or more, have an April 1 fiscal year. And you absolutely always have been required to adopt a budget before you enter into the new fiscal year, before April 1. Otherwise, it's like government shutdown. You have no authority to function, to pay bills, to incur obligations, to allow people to work. So in every year, it's important to plan ahead and plan your budget sessions that you're at, meetings where you're going to discuss the budget, and then the board meeting where you're going to hold your budget public hearing. Some townships, only a few, but some townships are still required to hold an annual meeting of the electors. Some choose to continue to schedule to hold an annual meeting of the electors. The sole purpose of the annual meeting of the electors anymore, for budget purposes, is to approve or alter the salary resolutions for the 3 or 4 board offices that you must adopt at least 30 days prior to your annual meeting if you hold one. So long story short, those are the 3 events: holding your budget public hearing, along with adopting your budget, which could happen at the same board meeting, and holding an annual meeting of the electors if you still choose to do so. Most townships are not in that situation. Would be necessary from the standpoint of getting your budget done. Now, one of the things we run across in every year is we get the question of, we have people from the public who are unhappy with things in our budget. We have board members who are resisting adopting the budget because they're unhappy with one thing or a few issues in the budget, and they're refusing to vote on it or whatever. And it's important right now to remember, because the public will not be able to attend in the numbers they might have previously, regardless of what option you choose, is that the budget is just a plan. It's only ever a plan. Approving the budget doesn't approve one single thing in the budget. Every assumption the budget is based on will have to be voted on by the board in the new fiscal year as you go through your year before those things become real. So if people are concerned about staffing levels or pay levels or programs or services that they like or don't like, they'll have plenty of time during the fiscal year, the new fiscal year, to discuss amendments to the budget, discuss whether the board should vote to approve them or how you go about doing them. Nothing is carved in stone when you adopt the budget. So particularly now, we're not trying to mute the public's input, but even just getting a basic budget put together. I've even had townships say, can we just kind of copy and paste last year's budget and adopt it right now? Sure, you know what? Yes, you can to get it done. It'll still be open for you to discuss and amend starting right away in the new fiscal year. So don't belabor your budget at this point. You do need to get something up and running. Fortunately, most townships have already held their budget public hearing at a board meeting. The budget public hearing is the one that requires notice in the newspaper. For general law townships, at least 6 days before the date of the meeting. For charter townships, at least 7. If you've already scheduled your budget public hearing at a board meeting, regular or special board meeting, and you haven't held it yet, yes, you should still hold that meeting and get your budget approved. Right now, we're strongly recommending, because that's what the governor and the federal guidelines all add up to, is do it electronically if at all possible. Now, what you're watching here was Mike and I on software where we're doing video conferencing, but you are not required to do video conferencing. You can do teleconferencing, which is basically a phone conference where everybody phones in. You don't need any special equipment. You just need to call or email a service provider, and there's many of them out there, and we do have lists of different companies on our website, on our coronavirus website. But chances are you can find them just by going online. They might even be free, depending on the number of people involved. And all you really need to do is share a phone number and a code. And that can be shared with your board members and the public. You can put it on the meeting notice on your meeting room door, on your website, any way you can get it out, any way you would have noticed, telling people that we're holding the meeting. And at this point, you do the best you can with involving everyone.
Yeah.
So you hold those meetings as soon as possible, and then you're set for the new fiscal year. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, and to that, the software that we're using is Zoom for this video. And on our website, I don't know if it's up yet, but it will be up here. You know, this is Tuesday around lunchtime, and it will be up sometime later this week. There's a nice how-to video as far as how to set up Zoom, how to use that for your township. And I think we're going to be getting one put up too, just on setting up a conference call and how that would be done. So if you have questions or concerns about how to do that, we will have a little how-to video set up under our coronavirus page that will help you better understand how to do that. And to the point with meetings and what is required and what's not required, what would be essential and non-essential. I think when we get into, you heard Catherine talk a lot about board meetings, annual meeting of the election or electors, and the budget public hearing and stuff. What you didn't hear her talk about are planning commission meetings, zoning board of appeals meeting, things like that. And I think we would say that those are not going to be critical meetings. Those aren't things that have to be done right now. So I think, from an in-person standpoint, you wouldn't be allowed to hold those type of meetings. However, if you still wanted to meet, the ways to do that would be through these type of video conferencing or or phone conferences if you wanted to still conduct your planning commission meetings and stuff like that. The executive order that the governor put out last week does allow for kind of a little bit of a leeway with the Open Meetings Act, as Catherine was saying, through the middle part of April, allowing for this type of process.
Right. And we issued, and it's on our webpage, a Q&A on how you hold meetings. But that executive order from last week, 15, and then our materials do talk about, you do still have to give notice, and that notice now has to include certain information if you're going to do things electronically. So quickly on the meetings, here are your options. We do believe, even based on yesterday's executive order, that because board members are necessary workers and are performing a necessary function by meeting, that yes, you are an exception to the stay at home, don't go out. So you could still hold a township board meeting completely in person. And we do understand in many townships where many people are just not familiar, haven't used a phone conference or a video conference. And I'll be honest, Mike and I, this is our first video conference, so we understand that many townships have asked us, could we still just have our meeting at the hall? Yes, you can. The public, however, is not allowed to attend. Between the federal guidelines and the executive order from the governor of yesterday, the stay at home, do not go out, they would not be coming to your meeting. You still hold the meeting in every way as if there were public going to be at the meeting, but they should not be there. Now, if you're there in an in-person meeting, follow all the guidelines that you've been given in terms of, and we have that information on our website and the executive order. I think we all know by now, stay at least 6 feet apart. Nothing ever requires you to sit at a head table or sit in an audience. You can stand in different corners of the room. Don't shake hands, cough into your elbow, wash your hands, have hand washing options available, sanitizer if you've got it, and be reasonable, take precautions. So it's not ideal to have an in-person meeting, but because there are meetings that need to occur, if you need to approve your budget and you want to meet in person and you just don't feel you can handle a meeting on a phone conference, yes, that is an option. We're not encouraging that, but that is an option.
Yeah, and one thing that I've been telling people too, by the off chance that you do get public into your meetings, is remove chairs from the seating area for where the public would be. And if you only normally have 3-4 members of the public that attend, if they were to attend again, remove a lot of the chairs and keep the chairs set up, at least 6 feet away from each other, and have them scattered about to encourage and kind of enforce, don't sit by each other, and keep that social distancing if people were to attend your meetings. And as Catherine was saying, certainly, follow the instructions of at least 6 feet away from each other for board members. And you do only need a quorum to take action on things. Right. For the most part, things approving bills and whatnot. So if you've got a 5-member board or a 7-member board, you only need 3 or 4 members present at the meeting. So if you do have some people that aren't feeling well, or maybe that are in a higher risk group that don't feel comfortable coming into a meeting and you have to meet in person, certainly you could conduct your business with 3 members on a 5-member board. So I think there are options out there, from that point.
And also, don't belabor it. Do the business you need to do. Table other business. You can change your schedule while you're in a regular or special meeting. You can change your schedule to remove already scheduled meetings, like regular meetings in the new fiscal year, from your schedule, which, because there isn't a way to cancel from outside a meeting, this is your best opportunity to do that. Also, if you don't already have one, consider adopting a post-audit policy, which allows certain bills, payroll, utilities, other things to be paid before the board has voted to approve them, for the board to approve at a later meeting. We do have a small sample of that language, we're happy to get that to you. We included it in the documentation that we posted on our website. So do consider that, table things, clear the decks, understand that in any township, charter, or general law, the supervisor can on his or her own call a special meeting. You do still have to notice board meetings. You do still have to post special meeting notice at least 18 hours prior to the meeting, but that may make more sense as we move into the new fiscal year. And you have to post what the business of the meeting is in a special meeting notice. So yeah, keep it short and sweet, get your business done.
Yeah, and one of the questions that we get routinely, and we get this even without this going on, but we've been getting it a lot more lately, is what's the process for canceling a meeting? If we don't have any business to conduct, how do we cancel a meeting? And frankly, the answer to that is the Open Meetings Act doesn't allow for canceling of a scheduled board meeting. However, in light of what's been going on, we did have the conversation with MTA legal counsel as far as a process if there's assumption that there's not going to be a quorum present at the meeting. And basically the advice that we've been giving is if the supervisor, presumably, potentially maybe somebody else on the board, but generally the supervisor, if they poll members of the board to find out if they are planning to attend the meeting, shouldn't be done by a group text or something like that. But if the supervisor is just solely calling each member and asking them, are you planning on attending our meeting? If the answer back is that there's not going to be enough people that are planning to be there to constitute a quorum, then they could post notice and say, essentially due to lack of quorum, there's not going to be a meeting, and maybe notice when the next meeting is going to take place. Again, there's not a procedure for doing that in the Open Meetings Act, but we do feel pretty comfortable that that would be an acceptable process on doing it.
Right.
And again, right now, members of the public shouldn't be coming out to meetings really anyways. But as a board yourself, if you feel like you don't need to meet, maybe you have a post audit policy and all the bills that you need to pay are already, can be approved and can be paid prior to board approval, and you don't have anything else on the agenda that's earth shattering. If you wanted to not hold your April meeting, I think that would be okay if you follow the procedures.
Right. One quick note, as you can probably tell, Mike and I are working from our homes and MTA is not closed. I have by policy been working for at least a week now. In all MTA employees are working in their homes. We have the ability to do that thanks to some planning by our executive director and some teams of staff members, which was originally designed for inclement weather, but was fortuitous. So we are all working. MTA is open for business, just not at our regular facility. And you can call us and email us and we will respond. We're working our regular hours. And I'm using that as a lead in to the next section, talking about who works and who doesn't. And with the idea that the executive orders and the federal guidelines all add up to people should be taking reasonable precautions and staying at home. Now, Michigan doesn't have a stay in place. You're not self-quarantining. You can walk your dog. You can, enjoy the spring air, but you're not supposed to be going beyond basically out for business and sharing the virus or exposing yourself to it. So the governor's order talking about who can work basically does raise some questions, and we did release some information yesterday after MTA legal counsel and I reviewed the materials that the governor's executive order included, which also that executive order referenced a federal memo from CISA, C-I-S-A, and we've got it on our web page. In fact, I'm going to switch for a second here. I'm going to switch over to that page and share it. And I think you can see here, we've got on our coronavirus webpage, the executive order to suspend activities, the one from last week on how you can participate in remote meetings, and then our updated fact sheet on the planning, our Q&A from yesterday, And this CISA memo on identification of essential critical infrastructure workers, that's where the governor got that language, critical infrastructure workers, basically translates to who's necessary, who can work. And it's from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security. That's what CISA is. And the governor has relied on that. And the nice thing about that memo, as official as it looked just there on the screen, is it has a very readable, very understandable reference section, a long list of how do you identify who are essential workers, who should work. It goes into far more detail than the governor or our materials do. And it talks about all kinds of things. And the governor's executive order defers to this. Now, not everything is on here. And the biggest question that we've been receiving so far about, I think I'm back on here, is building inspectors, or to some degree zoning permitting officials. We don't have an answer to that yet. In the CISA memo and the governor's executive order, at least some aspects of ongoing construction are included as necessary or critical infrastructure needs. So that would make it sound like permitting would also fall into that category. No one has spelled that out yet. I did participate in a webcast where Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist was the speaker, and we did hear him say that they would be issuing more guidance. They are discussing these different issues with their legal counsel, the Attorney General, and they will be adding to the frequently asked questions on the executive orders webpage. The governor's executive orders are all posted on that webpage at michigan.gov, executive orders. And they are also adding to, on a regular basis, FAQs. So we expect some answers to that coming sometime soon. In the meantime, everything we've heard from the governor's office, including people that Judy Allen, our Director of Government Relations, has talked to, have stressed that common sense and a broad interpretation of who should not be out and about. The goal of these orders is to keep people safe. So we start with, you're not going out, you're not working, but then we look at who is necessary. They're telling people to use your common sense, be practical. Not everything has to happen right now. Some things may, this order is in place for 3 weeks. Things may change. We will get more guidance. So right now, it may make sense to just tell people to stay home for the first few days until we learn more. Mike, did you want to add to any of that?
I think to your point regarding who's essential and who's not essential, and because I did get the question a couple times yesterday about MTA and would MTA offices still be open, and would we be continuing to work and answer questions and provide these services? And to Catherine's point, the answer would be, we can't be in the office, and we haven't been in the office. Unfortunately, we are set up to work remotely because we wouldn't be an essential service. So if we weren't working from home, we would be closed down and we wouldn't be able to provide the service to our members. But because we are set up to do this, we can still continue to operate from our homes, and we'll be here for the duration to assist our members the best that we can throughout this time. So I think that's one important note to make, that we will be here throughout. And I think, there's, of course, other questions that we keep getting also regarding the May election and even the August primary, and some of these, and frankly, some of that we just don't have answers to yet. But we have heard the governor's office, and the Secretary of State, they are working on things, and they're supposed to be putting out announcements relatively soon, I think, regarding how the elections are going to, if there's going to be something different for the May election, how that's going to be handled. And certainly as we move forward into August, or any deadlines or anything like that, if there's going to be any changes along those lines, we are anticipating some announcements from them on that.
Yep. And one last thing, at least from me, I have had a few questions about Freedom of Information Act responses, FOIA. Are FOIA responses necessary? So in our material, MTA legal counsel and I agreed that because there's statutory deadlines for the township to respond to FOIA requests, to the degree, again, be reasonable, be safe, but to the degree that you can respond, yes, that if you, and this isn't an order from MTA that you must, this is if you can, if you're in a position to do it safely, then yes, that would be something you could say is necessary. Now, I have heard from some municipal attorneys who take a different approach, and we always defer to your local attorney. You should be working with your local legal counsel for specific legal guidance. We're not able to give that to you. We won't show up in court if someone challenges some action that you take. Because we aren't your attorney, we give advice that, again, is broad stroke to try and keep you out of legal liability as much as possible. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be a totally acceptable different answer from your local attorney. But just to my kind of dig in a little bit more on that, if you have many FOIA requests you receive nowadays come via email or in some writing that you receive, and a lot of your documents are digital. And so if you can respond digitally and get it done, I mean, you could do that from a home office. I mean, then you don't even have to worry about, am I able to go to the hall to do this or not? No one should risk their life for a FOIA request, but if you can meet the requirements, go ahead and do it. Also, the question is, will people come to pay, and they pay in cash when they come to pick up their FOIA request? I've heard that from some larger entities, particularly cities. Well, your requirement for the township to comply and to provide the information or meet the deadlines for how the township responds is not the same thing as a deadline for the person to actually have the stuff in hand, to pick it up or to come and pay for their deposit or their bill. So don't make it more difficult than it has to be until we hear otherwise, and we think the governor may get this addressed as well in those FAQs. But until then, if you can respond to a FOIA request without going outside and endangering you or anyone else unnecessarily, go ahead and do it. Follow those deadlines. But nothing says you have to put something literally in someone's hot little hands and touch them or face them across the counter right now. It never has been required that you do that within particular time frames as long as you have the stuff done. So if you have any questions, let us know, but understand we won't have specifics from the governor until we see them on the governor's FAQs. So that.
Thanks, Catherine. And so, you know, as I said before, MIS will be here, MTA will be here through this. So certainly if you have any other questions or concerns, you can reach out to us. Cindy Dodge, who's not on this video with us, but is probably answering phone calls right now as we do this. Catherine and myself will be around to answer questions, potentially put out more of these videos as time goes on. If there are topics that we need, I think MTA as a whole will probably do some more of these. So hopefully this was valuable for everybody to watch and to take some information from. And again, know that we're out there, we're gathering this information. We're finding out about this stuff pretty much the same time that everybody else is. And we're trying to do our diligence to try to get those answers on how this affects townships so we can provide those services to you and let you know and keep you informed. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk to you later.